I am Robert Malone. I am 68 years old, and I am only now beginning to understand that the man who signed my paychecks, my mortgage, my grandchildren's tuition, was never seen by his own daughter as anything more than a wallet with a heartbeat. I spent 44 years building a furniture manufacturing company out of a two-car garage in Hickory, North Carolina. 3 weeks ago, at the engagement dinner I paid for, my daughter looked me dead in the eye and told me I had become an embarrassment to the family name. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I simply set down my fork, folded my napkin, and smiled. The following morning, every account she believed was hers, every credit line, every trust fund distribution, vanished before she finished her coffee. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments which state you're watching from tonight, and if you've ever had to choose between being loved and being respected by your own child. Hit that like button if you believe a parent's sacrifice should never be mistaken for a debt owed. It was a warm September evening in Hickory, the kind where the humidity clings to your shirt collar even after the sun goes down. We were seated at Castellano's, the only white tablecloth restaurant in town, the one I used to walk past as a young man and swear that someday I would be able to afford a meal there without checking my wallet first. Now I owned the building it sat in. This dinner was supposed to celebrate my daughter Vanessa's engagement to a man named Bradley Ashcroft, a real estate developer from Charlotte who wore his family's old money the way some men wear cologne, a little too much, applied a little too eagerly. My late wife, Carol, would have hated him. Carol had been gone 6 years now, taken by a stroke on a Tuesday morning while she was watering her tomato plants, and not a single day passed where I didn't reach for the phone to tell her something before remembering there was no one on the other end anymore. Vanessa was 32, my only child, and she sat across from me in a dress that cost more than my first delivery truck, sipping champagne and laughing at something Bradley whispered in her ear. I had built Malone Fine Furnishings from nothing. I learned to run a table saw before I learned to shave. Carol and I had slept in the back office of that garage for the first 2 years, surviving on peanut butter sandwiches and stubbornness, because we believed that if we built something real, something lasting, it would mean our daughter would never have to know the particular fear of an empty refrigerator. We grew that garage into a $32 million operation with 2 factories and clients as far away as Toronto. I gave Vanessa the vice president title of marketing 4 years ago, not because she had earned it through the floor up, but because I wanted to see her carry something of mine into the future. I told myself that was fatherly love. I am no longer certain it wasn't cowardice, a refusal to make my only child work for anything the way her mother and I had. The tension at that table had been building for months, and I had been foolish enough to ignore it, the same way you ignore a strange sound in your car engine until the day it strands you on the highway shoulder. Vanessa had been distant, short with me on calls, quick to roll her eyes whenever I brought up the factory floor or the numbers from the quarterly report. Bradley had started attending our leadership meetings, uninvited, offering opinions on distribution contracts he understood nothing about. I told myself it was young love, that Vanessa simply wanted her fiancé involved. I told myself a great many comfortable lies that autumn. The check for the dinner had not even arrived when Vanessa set down her champagne flute with a sharp click against the table and said the words that would end everything I thought I understood about my own child. Dad, we need to talk about your spending. The scholarship fund, the veterans program, all of it. It's an embarrassment. Bradley's parents asked why my father throws money at strangers instead of investing in his own family's future. I sat there in that dim, candlelit restaurant, feeling something cold settle behind my ribs. The scholarship fund she was referring to put 12 local kids through community college every year. Kids who reminded me of the boy I used to be, sanding table legs in a garage with holes in his shoes. Bradley's father says a man your age should be transferring assets, not donating them, she continued, her voice climbing with irritation. Bradley nodding along beside her like a man agreeing with a verdict he had already written. You're an embarrassment, Dad. Stop wasting the family's money on people who aren't even blood. I did not scream. I did not defend myself. I looked at my daughter, at the shape of her mother's eyes in her face, and I felt something inside me go completely, permanently quiet. I reached for my wallet, placed $600 in cash on the table, more than enough to cover the meal and the wine, and I told them both to have a good evening. I drove home alone that night with the windows down, letting the cool air hit my face, and somewhere around the county line, I stopped feeling sad and started feeling something far more useful. Clarity. I want you to understand something about me before I go further. I am not a vindictive man. For 44 years I built things, chairs, tables, cabinets, a company, a marriage, a daughter I believed I was raising to be better than the entitlement I now saw sitting across from me at that table. But there is a particular kind of quiet that settles into a man when he realizes the people he sacrificed everything for have started calculating his worth in dollars rather than years. That quiet is more dangerous than any shout. My late father used to tell me that a man who raises his voice has already lost the argument. I did not raise my voice that night. I simply began making calls. The next morning, I was up before dawn, the way I have been every day since I was 24 years old. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, the same one Carol and I bought secondhand back when we couldn't afford new, and I called Gerald Whitfield, my attorney and closest friend of 30 years. "Gerald," I said, "I need you at my office at 8 sharp. Bring the trust documents. All of them." Gerald has represented me since before Vanessa was born, and in all that time, I had never once asked him to move quickly on anything involving my daughter. He knew from the flatness in my voice alone that something fundamental had shifted. What Vanessa did not know, what she had never once bothered to ask about, was the actual structure of the money she believed belonged to her. 4 years earlier, when I gave her the vice president title, I had also, at Carol's dying request, set up something called the Carol Malone Family Trust, naming Vanessa as a beneficiary contingent on specific conditions tied to responsible stewardship of company assets and continued involvement in the charitable programs Carol herself had started. Vanessa had signed those papers without reading a single page, too eager to get to the celebratory lunch afterward to bother with the fine print. She believed the credit cards, the country club membership, the monthly disbursement into her personal checking account, all of it was simply hers, an inheritance already delivered, rather than what it actually was, a privilege extended at my discretion, and revocable at mine. I arrived at my office that morning before any of my employees, the fluorescent lights humming overhead in the empty administrative wing, and I sat behind my desk waiting for Gerald with a stillness I had not felt in months. When he arrived, he set the folder down without a word and simply asked, "Are you certain, Robert?" I told him I had never been more certain of anything since the day I signed the lease on my first factory. We spent the next 4 hours drafting the formal notice of trust modification, citing the exact violation clause, willful public disparagement of the charitable mission, and attempt to redirect trust assets for personal benefit outside the scope of the original intent. By noon, Vanessa's monthly disbursement was frozen. Her corporate credit card, the one she used for everything from her manicures to Bradley's golf club dues, was deactivated. Her access to the company's marketing budget, which I had generously allowed her to oversee with almost no oversight, was suspended, pending a full audit. I did not call to tell her. I let her find out the way she had let me find out, at the worst possible moment, in front of the people whose opinion she valued more than mine. That evening, my phone rang 41 times. I let it ring. Around 9 o'clock, Vanessa showed up at my house, pounding on the front door hard enough that I worried for the old oak panel Carol had picked out herself 20 years ago. I opened the door and found my daughter standing there, mascara streaked down her face, Bradley hovering behind her in the driveway like a man unsure whether he was allowed to get out of the car. "What did you do?" she screamed, shoving past me into the foyer. "My card got declined at the spa. My account is frozen. Dad, what is wrong with you?" I closed the door quietly behind her and said, "You told me I was an embarrassment for helping strangers with my own money. I simply decided to stop wasting it on someone who isn't grateful for it either." She stared at me like I had struck her. "That money is mine," she said. "I told you," I replied. "It was never yours. It was your mother's dream, and I have been the only one honoring it." What happened over the following 2 weeks is the part of this story that still, even now, makes my hands go cold when I think about it. Vanessa did not simply accept the freeze and wait for the audit, the way an innocent person would. Instead, she and Bradley began a campaign, quiet and calculated, that I did not fully understand until Gerald's investigator laid it all out for me on his conference table 3 weeks later. Bradley, it turned out, was not merely a real estate developer with old money charm. He was drowning in debt, nearly $400,000 of it, from a failed luxury condo development in Charlotte that had collapsed the previous year. His family's money, the money Vanessa had been so impressed by, existed mostly on paper and in the stories his father told at dinner parties. He needed my daughter's inheritance, or more precisely my company, far more urgently than either of them had ever let on. The investigator, a sharp, quiet woman named Denise Farrow, who Gerald had used for corporate matters before, discovered that Vanessa and Bradley had visited a geriatric care attorney in Charlotte 2 days after our dinner at Castellano's, before I had even frozen the trust. They had gone there to inquire, calmly, clinically, about the legal process for petitioning a guardianship evaluation based on cognitive decline. They had printed out my recent medical records, obtained through Vanessa's access as my emergency contact at the family physician's office, and were assembling a file to present to a judge, arguing that a 68-year-old widower who gave away money to strangers and had recently been, in their words, increasingly forgetful and erratic, needed a court-appointed guardian to manage his assets responsibly. That guardian, naturally, would be my daughter. I sat in Gerald's office and read through the printed intake forms with a stillness that frightened even me. My own daughter had begun building a legal case to have me declared incompetent 3 weeks before I had ever frozen a single dollar. The scholarship comment, the embarrassment comment, none of it had been about values or family reputation at all. It had been the opening move in a plan to seize control of everything Carol and I built, before I could give any more of it away to people Vanessa considered undeserving strangers. Denise had more. Bradley had already spoken with a contractor about renovating the executive offices at Malone Fine Furnishings, the very offices I still worked out of 5 days a week, discussing floor plans as though the transition of ownership were already a foregone conclusion. He had reached out to 2 of my largest distribution clients in Ohio and Tennessee, introducing himself as the incoming operational partner, promising better terms once he, in his words, streamlined leadership. My own factory floor manager, a good man named Curtis, who had worked for me for 18 years, mentioned to Gerald in passing that Bradley had asked him, almost casually, how quickly the company could be sold if the right buyer came along. I want to be honest with you about what I felt reading that file. It was not rage, not at first. It was grief, the specific, hollow grief of realizing that the daughter I had rocked to sleep, the daughter Carol and I had prayed over during 3 miscarriages before she finally arrived healthy and whole, had looked at her own father's aging body and seen not a man to protect, but an obstacle to be managed. I sat in that office for a long time after Denise left, and Gerald did not rush me. He simply poured 2 glasses of bourbon and waited. "What do you want to do, Robert?" he finally asked. I told him I wanted to be smarter than they expected me to be. For 32 years, people had underestimated me because I spoke slowly and preferred a table saw to a boardroom. I had built an empire on being underestimated. I intended to use that one last time. Over the next 10 days, I did not confront Vanessa. I did not call the geriatric attorney's office to demand answers. Instead, I moved with the same patience I used when I was 26 years old and negotiating my very first commercial contract, waiting silently for the other side to overplay their hand. I had Denise quietly obtain copies of Bradley's financial records through public court filings related to his bankrupt condo project. All perfectly legal, all a matter of public record he had simply hoped no one would bother to check. I had Gerald file, discreetly and without any public announcement, an amendment restructuring the company's ownership into a newly formed holding entity that would require unanimous board approval, myself included as permanent chairman with veto power, for any sale, transfer, or change in operational leadership. I met privately with Curtis and my 3 other senior managers, the people who had built this company alongside me for 2 decades, and I told them the truth. Every one of them looked me in the eye and told me they would follow my lead, whatever that turned out to mean. And I made one more call, to a family physician named Dr. Patricia Renner, a woman who had known me for 15 years and who I trusted with my life in the most literal sense. I asked her to conduct a full cognitive evaluation, comprehensive, documented, unimpeachable, purely for my own peace of mind. She looked at me with the particular concern of a doctor who has just heard something troubling in a patient's voice and asked me why. I told her the truth. She did not charge me for the appointment. 2 days later, I had a signed, notarized medical evaluation stating in clear clinical language that I was of entirely sound mind, sharp memory, and full legal capacity, dated a full week before Vanessa's guardianship petition was scheduled to be filed. The guardianship hearing was set for a Thursday morning in the Catawba County Courthouse, a building I had walked past 1,000 times and never once expected to enter as the subject of a legal proceeding questioning my own mind. Vanessa did not know I had discovered any of this. She believed, right up until the moment she walked into that courtroom with Bradley and a young, nervous attorney trailing behind her, that she was about to become the legal guardian of her father's entire estate. I was already seated when they arrived, Gerald beside me, Dr. Renner's notarized evaluation in a folder on the table, along with Denise's complete file documenting Bradley's financial desperation, his conversations with my clients, his conversations with a contractor about renovating offices that were not his to renovate. Vanessa's face, when she saw me sitting there calm and composed rather than confused and frightened as she had clearly expected, told me everything I needed to know about how certain she had been of victory. The judge, a measured woman named Judge Alvarez, who had clearly seen every version of this particular family tragedy before, asked Vanessa's attorney to present the basis for the petition. He spoke about my age, about erratic financial decisions, about concerning behavior reported by a loving daughter worried for her father's welfare. When he finished, Gerald stood, and in a voice as calm and steady as I had ever heard him use, presented Dr. Renner's evaluation, dated before the petition was even filed, along with Denise's documentation. He laid out, methodically, the timeline that no one in that room except myself and Vanessa had lived through. The scholarship comment at dinner. The trust freeze the following morning. The visit to the geriatric attorney 2 days before that freeze, proving the guardianship scheme predated any so-called erratic behavior on my part by weeks. Bradley's $400,000 in debt. His conversations with my clients about incoming leadership. His inquiries about renovating an office he did not yet own. I watched my daughter's face as Gerald spoke. I watched the exact moment she understood that I knew everything. That the frozen trust had never been the punishment, only the first small tremor before the entire structure came down. Judge Alvarez did not take long to rule. She dismissed the petition with what I can only describe as visible disappointment in the two young people standing before her, and she noted for the record that she found the timeline, quote, deeply troubling, and suggested rather pointedly that the district attorney's office might have an interest in reviewing the matter for potential elder financial exploitation charges, given Bradley's documented outreach to company clients regarding a transfer of ownership that had never been authorized. I did not smile in that courtroom. I felt no triumph, only a very old, very tired kind of sorrow. But I did stand, and before I walked out, I turned to my daughter one final time. You told me I was an embarrassment for spending my own money on people who needed it, I said. I have spent 44 years building something so that you would never have to know hunger the way I did. I am sorry that instead of gratitude, all I managed to build in you was appetite. I walked out of that courthouse into a bright, cold morning, the kind of sharp autumn light that makes everything look a little more honest than it usually does. I did not go back to the office that day. I drove out to the old garage where Malone Fine Furnishings had started, the building still standing, rented now to a young couple running a small woodworking business of their own, and I sat in my truck outside it for nearly an hour, remembering the sound of Carol's laugh over the table saw, remembering the particular ache of building something from absolutely nothing. In the weeks that followed, the company's board, at my recommendation, formally severed all ties with Vanessa's marketing role, citing the documented conflict of interest and the ongoing legal review. I did not disinherit her entirely. I am still her father, and some loves do not simply switch off no matter how deeply they are wounded. But I restructured the trust permanently, tying any future distribution not to blood alone, but to the same conditions Carol had always believed in: service, humility, a demonstrated respect for the people who have less than you do. Vanessa has reached out twice since the hearing. I have not yet answered. I am not certain I am ready to, and I have decided, for the first time in my life, that I do not owe anyone an answer before I am ready to give it. The scholarship fund is still running. 12 kids from Hickory are in community college this fall because of it. Kids who remind me, every single time I read their thank you letters, of a boy who once slept behind a table saw because he believed something better was possible if he worked hard enough for it. I have started spending Tuesday afternoons at the community college myself now, mentoring a few of those students directly, teaching them woodworking, teaching them the particular dignity of building something with your own two hands. It is, strange as it sounds, the most peace I have felt since Carol passed. If there is a lesson in any of this, and I have had a great deal of time to think about what that lesson might be, it is this: love your children with everything you have, but never let that love become a blindfold. The people who truly love you will celebrate your generosity, not resent it. The people who see your money as a debt owed to them rather than a gift given by you have already told you exactly who they are, usually long before you're ready to hear it. Trust, once it has been used as a weapon against you, deserves to be re-earned, not simply reinstated out of guilt or habit. A father's job is not to hand his children a fortune. It is to hand them a conscience. And if that conscience never arrives, no amount of money will ever be enough to fill the space where it should have been. If this story meant something to you tonight, if it reminded you of your own family, your own quiet sacrifices, your own moments of choosing dignity over defeat, I would ask you to hit that like button and subscribe, so these stories keep finding the people who need to hear them. Leave a comment and tell me, where are you watching from tonight, and what would you have done in my place? Stay steady, stay strong, and never let anyone convince you that your kindness was ever the mistake.